Hey everyone, how we doing today? This is James Sweeney, aka SplitSuit. Welcome back to another video. And as part of the Ask SplitSuit a Question series, a bunch of people asked hand history questions, and today's question comes from Larry. And Larry just wants me to review this hand played with 8-7 in a 1-2 live game. So let's check it out. Okay, in this hand there's a limp under the gun, folds around to hero who decides to attack for 10, and yes, I'm totally cool with using your position. Yes, I'm totally cool with raising limpers. Yes, 8-7 isn't my favorite hand in the world to do it with, but whatever. My main gripe here is going to be with the size. I think going to just 5x is going to get you called by the limper pretty much always, and I wouldn't be shocked to pick up another caller once or twice as well. So this is a situation where I think $10 is not the size you want to use. Something like maybe $15 up to $20 would probably get the job done a large chunk of the time. And yeah, I'm okay if I raise that large and everyone folds. I still pick up $5 uncontested. That's pretty awesome. I don't really have to worry about much, as opposed to going too small and then all of a sudden you're creating situations where this is going to happen much more often than you probably want it to. So Hero did describe this table as fairly loose, and he says that the small blind is known to bluff, but we'll talk a little bit more about that later in this hand as it progresses. In this situation with flop a straight draw, there's a donk by small blind, and again, remember, a donk bet is just a bet made into the previous street aggressor. We were the aggressor preflop, he led into us on the flop, so it's called donk bet. Yes, it's a derogatory term, but it's not necessarily calling him a donk. In this situation, Hero decides to call. I would call as well. I don't really see much reason to raise. I really don't want to raise here, and then all of a sudden he decides to blast off, and now we're in a really, really awful situation with just an open-ended straight draw. Whereas we can just call, use our position, force him to do some stuff, and of course actualize our equity as we go through. So 5 on the turn, pretty great card for us. Small blind checks. Hero decides to bet for 60. So at this point, of course, I am totally cool with betting. I'm totally cool with betting large, especially against someone who you view as kind of more of a loose aggressive player, which Larry said he was. You know, again, because he's loose, you can assume that there are enough second best stuff that can and will continue. You can assume there's probably a little bit more inelasticity with other draws. So all this is very, very good. I like what we're doing so far. But Larry asks a very specific question that says, should I move all in on the turn and move him off his hand? So this is something that has been talked about a little bit in the YouTube comments on some of the videos that I've posted recently, and it's just one of those where like people panic so much when they have nuttish hands that they think, well, I should just pile it in early and hope I get called some percentage of the time, but more often than not I'm just going to pick the pot up and I just don't want to risk losing the pot, right? This seems to be like the thought process and logic that's used. And I just want you to get rid of that thought. It's a terrible, terrible thought process. Because essentially all you're doing is you're saying, hey, villain, would you like to play perfectly? And if so, go for it, right? Because if you just drill it here, you're only getting called by like the same hand, maybe a set occasionally, but more often than not, you're just allowing small blind to play perfectly with draws, queen X, all that kind of second best stuff. We don't ever want to allow our opponents to play perfectly. Yes, you may pick up a pot uncontested and you don't have to worry about getting sucked out on, but that's not the way we play poker. Yes, sometimes we're going to make a great play and sometimes we're going to get sucked out on, or sometimes we're going to run into the top of our opponent's range. We're going to lose anyway. It is what it is. But it doesn't mean that we just want to pile it and all of a sudden just allow our opponent to play perfectly. By doing that, we're making huge mistakes and leaving a lot of money on the table, even though, yes, we will lose the pot some percentage of the time. So should we move all in on the turn? Most certainly not. I love the fact that we're betting, love the fact that we're betting nice and large near pot. We go forward, small blind decides to call, river fills up the flush draw, and the small blind decides to pile it in our face. Okay, so now I'll share all the other information that Larry gave me. So Larry says the small blind is a loose aggressive player. Hero's image is pretty tight, although he does loosen up on the button. Hero says that the small blind bluffs a lot. He saw him bluffing a busted draw in the past, and he was actually caught by someone else earlier, actually a few hands ago, trying to represent a flush as well. So one of the things when you're using information like that, especially things like, you know, saw someone representing or saw someone bluffing, whatever it is, think about the context of that pot. Was it for an all-in situation, or was it just a small bluff on the river in a smaller pot, right? Was it against someone who the small blind may have had history or dynamic with? Was it a very specific situation or board, right? You can't just say, okay, well, I saw someone representing a flush once and say, okay, well, any single time that a flush draw fills up and they bet, they must must just be trying to rep it. They probably don't, right? Everything is contextual, and I don't want to see you like overusing information like that. So one of the big things I would think about in this situation is, would the small blind ever show up here with things like two pair sets, any of that kind of stuff? And I don't think so. It doesn't really make much sense that this person would decide to just like check call the turn when the only draw that fills up is 7-8 and then decide to pile it in when the flush draw fills up. It just kind of is really, really awkward. I don't think we're going to be looking at things like sets and two pairs very often. Then I asked myself, are there any busted draws that make sense? Now, Jack 10 of clubs obviously got there. Jack 10 of spades probably double barrels the turn. So now we're only looking at a couple combinations of Jack 10 suited left. And it's not like our opponent can have like 7-8 of clubs because we have the 7 of clubs in our hand. So it's not like they would be doing it with that kind of hand. And then the other thing you have to keep in mind is like, okay, maybe he does this with like, I don't know, King 10 of diamonds or something like that, but even that's kind of a little bit awkward as well. So realistically, there are a lot of possible flush combos that the small blind could have, that they would reasonably play like this. At least in my opinion, again, thinking that they're loose, thinking that they're going to be pretty inelastic and calling a larger turn bet. Yes, I don't think a good player is going to do that with a flush draw, but someone like this easily could. So we're in a situation where a lot of flushes make sense. Not a lot of two pair sets ever make sense. And then it's just, is there enough extra stuff that he would turn into a bluff, right? Does he really call the turn with King 10 of diamonds? I don't really think so. So I think it pushes a large density of this range to be flushes. And as much as I hate making really, really big folds, if it's a situation where it's just not realistic that he's going to show up with enough second best combos, we're only getting 2.6 to 1 on a call. We need to be good here at least 28% of the time and more than that so we can actually make profit and buffer on it. And I think in this situation, it's going to be a little bit tough just because, again, I don't expect very many bluffs. Yes, we've seen him bluff in the past, but contextually, I don't think it makes much sense that he's going to get to the river with enough possible bluff combos unless he's just check calling turns with a whole bunch of gut shots, in which case, okay, maybe, but again, I don't really see that given the size that we used. So unfortunately in this situation, I think the call was a little too optimistic, but again, I'm not going to like super blame you because you saw him making this kind of play in the past. But again, when you see that kind of play, really think about the context of it. Not just did someone try to rep a flush and bluff, but what was the exact spot, and does it make sense that this spot is a pure parallel to it, or maybe not so much. So Larry, thanks for the great hand, and if you or anyone else has a poker-related hand or question, feel free to send it to me directly at splitsuit.com/send, and same as always, if you have any comments or questions, please don't hesitate to let me know. Otherwise, I'll see you back next week with a brand new video, and in the meantime, good luck out there, and happy grinding.